The Cabinet will tomorrow discuss amendments to the criminal law which will lower the age of consent for sexual relations from 18 to 16. This just a year after a law was passed to protect children from sexual abuse, which specified the age at 18. Does this reflect the reality of India today? Join our special debate. First, let's go across tonight. Joining me exclusively is the Additional Solicitor General of India, Indra Jaising, who has of course campaigned for women's rights extensively in her legal career. Do you support this? Because the recent ordinance introduced by the government, of course, did not lower the age of sexual consent. They've apparently changed their mind.
Well, first of all, let me make it very clear that as of now, there is no cabinet decision. My understanding is the cabinet is likely to meet tomorrow, and the proposal will be moved by the Home Ministry before the cabinet tomorrow. So we are still talking about an issue which is not conclusively decided.
Yes.
On the other issue, whether I support it, my answer is yes. And my reasons are that after the age of 16, it's quite normal biologically for people to have sex with each other. It's just human. And what one has to safeguard against is that it is not something that happens without consent, because if it does, it then becomes an act of rape. So on the question whether there is a change of mind between the ordinance and the proposed new law, as I said, first we have to wait for the proposal. Yes. But in my to my knowledge, the process has been participatory between the time the ordinance was issued and the cabinet meeting is to take place. I'm aware that a lot of women's groups have actively been participating in this process, and I have to say that I'm pleased about the fact that the government did actually engage with them. So if there's a change, it's part of this process of discussion.
But however, 2-3 points is raised is because in India, I think defining when someone is mature enough to take decisions as an adult in a sense, because I think by lowering the age of sexual consent, it does imply that both are adult enough to take that decision. The question, of course, in the context of the recent Delhi gang rape, when we know that one of the accused is seen as a juvenile, too young to be tried for his crime, even though he is 17 and a few months. The government has stood firm that the juvenile age for a crime should not come down from 18 to 16. We know also child marriage is only legal at 18. Drinking in many states is only legal at 25. Voting is only legal at 18. Doesn't that imply complete confusion and the message that is being sent out by the Indian law, in a sense, of when you are adult?
Okay. Let me tell you, there is nothing like having a uniform age at when you can take a decision. This is not about being an adult. It's about when you can take a decision. Now, this varies from subject matter to subject matter. You can vote at a particular age. That is the issue of civil and political rights. When it comes to having sex, let me tell you, as the law stands today, there's nothing unlawful about a person above the age of 16 having sex with another person with consent, all right? So what you need to understand that you're dealing with an issue of biology over here. And if biologically a person is fully sexually mature at the age of 16 and has sex after the age of 16 with consent, if you raise the age to 18, you are going to be creating an army of criminals between the age of 16 to 18. We all know that it is an age group in which people do experiment with their sexuality. And to say that this activity should become criminal, it simply doesn't make any sense. As I said, you'll have an army of criminals running around the country and you won't know what to do with them. Every second person will have to be prosecuted, even if they say that we had sex with consent. Please hear me out. Now, this is as far as the age of consent is concerned. You can give consent to different activity at different ages in your life. It doesn't have to be a uniform age. There's nothing like just a uniform age of consent. Now, when it comes to the issue of marriage, let me tell you, you're right in saying that the Marriage Act puts down 18 at the age at which you can get married. But remember one thing, if a marriage takes place below the age of 18, it is not declared void.
And
right?
that's one of the two
it's
complaints.
Still, the marriage, please hear me out. No, no filing of complaints. It is not a void marriage, okay? In other words, it remains a legal, a binding marriage, a marriage which creates obligations between two people, although the law says 18 is the age of marriage. So there's no comparison. And in any case, you have people getting married below the age of 18. Obviously, they're indulging in sexual activity with each other. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to suggest that after the age of 16 and between 18, you're asking people to be abnormal. You're asking people to be biologically defunct if you say that they should not have sex between 16 and 18. And that, I think, is the most important reason.
No, but
Why?
But the only point I wanted to make on the issue of child marriages, yes, you were saying that the marriage may not be void, there's certain rights, but isn't it contradictory if you say you can have sexual consent at 16, but you can't by law, or you shouldn't by law, get married till 18? I mean, if it does happen, okay, it won't be declared void, but it's not considered the same. Yes.
The important word you used here is should not, okay? The fact of the matter is that a person even today is marrying under the age of 18, and that person's marriage is not invalid, all right? I could have understood if you had said that any marriage which takes place below 18 will become void. It doesn't. So there are, and moreover, you know, the consequences of sexual activity between 16 and 18 are not necessarily the same as the consequences of getting married. There are certain responsibilities attached to marriage which don't necessarily attach to a situation between 16 and 18. So I'd like to return to the issue of normal biological activity. What I would like to say is, how can anybody make illegal what is natural? That's the whole point.
Well, though of course this did actually happen last year. It is currently the law, unless it gets changed. When you go by the Protection of Child Abuse Act, that the current law does say the age of consent is 18. So that is currently what's actually happening. But I
agree. Look, can you just give me a moment, please?
Yes.
When you say current law, we've had the Indian Penal Code for more than a century now, and it was not the current law. It became current law only in 2012. And I'd like you to know that even in 2012, when the law was being drafted, there was considerable debate on this issue. And there were many people, many organizations, including official governmental organizations, which did not agree with raising the age from 16 to 18. So it's been a contested issue since the time it was introduced, as recently as in 2012.
Right.
Now, in the proposed new law, if they do bring down the age, if they do retain, I would say, the age at 16, as it exists in the Indian Penal Code, obviously amendments to the child sexual abuse law will also have to be made. That, I agree, will be a contradiction. You can't have two laws on the table.
Yes.
One made in 2012, which puts the age at 18, and another made in 2013, which puts the age at 16.
Yes.
So my understanding is, if the cabinet tomorrow does decide to bring the age down to 16, consequential changes will have to be made in the child sexual abuse law as well.
Indra Jaisingh, thank you for joining us and clarifying many of the issues that arise out of this current note, which will be presented for before the cabinet tomorrow. Thank you very much. I'll also now introduce the rest of my panel. Joining me this evening is Harish Salve, former Solicitor General of India. Also with me in the studio is Pinky Anand of the BJP Legal Cell, also advocate of the Supreme Court. I'm also joined by Neena Nayak, member of the National Commission for Protection of Children's Rights, and I'm also joined by Nishi Pandey, Professor Nishi Pandey, formerly of the Lucknow University. Mr. Harish Salve, well, lawyer to lawyer, you heard Indra Jaisingh. They make an eloquent argument for why this is necessary, that the age of sexual consent must be lowered. The larger question, of course, of the many contradictions at different ages for different things currently on the law books in India. What is your reaction, sir, to this government change of heart in a sense?
See, I am a little worried, not so much about the decision, because I think that's a matter which requires a lot more thorough debate and discussion and research before we lower ages like this. I'm worried about this decision-making process which smacks of ad hocism. You have a marriage law which says you should not marry till you're 18. Let's park the issue of whether or not a marriage which is below the age of 18 is declared void or not void. The public policy in India, because laws are public policy. Public policy in India is that you cannot get married before the age of 18. So are you trying to say that if you are sexually active, then please have premarital sex till 18 and then get married? I mean, that's a very wrong message. The second problem which I have is, I heard what Indira Jaising said, and much as I have great deference for her views in this subject, in the Western world, we know for a fact that children now a large number of children get sexually active at 14. So should we now reduce the age of consent to 14? To say that you are preventing legitimate sexual activity between 16 and 18, I thought the first thing to change is then the age of marriage. I mean, you're not old enough to drive a car, you're not old enough to get married, but your biological needs have to be catered to, and therefore you have to lower the age of consent. You know, this is such a sensitive issue. And secondly, I have another major problem.
Yes.
A lot of these laws are being made metro-centric. We are seeing children in the metros and making these laws. These laws have to cater to India. And I don't think we have got sufficient data on which such major sociological changes are being made.
In fact, interesting, let me bring in Professor Nishi Pandey here, because we had the data for, say, Uttar Pradesh, and this is one worrying figure, which is, of course, on the girls here who are getting married below 18. So even though there's a law which says that you shouldn't get married before 18, about 39% of marriages in Uttar Pradesh actually happen below the age of 18, and there's a rise in, of course, teen pregnancies because of that, and the maternal mortality rate. So Professor Pandey, when you look at this, it's not really just about the issue of biological needs and sexual consent. It's also about the age a girl ideally should get pregnant, the high maternal mortality rate in states like Uttar Pradesh. Come in here. Harish Salve says this decision is metrocentric.
Look, the point that I agree with Mr. Salve is that, you know, the majority of India does not live in metros. So if you're looking at Mufassil towns and you're looking like towns like Lucknow and Mufassil towns around it, and look into the depths of Uttar Pradesh, I really think that if the marriage age is 18 and if you're reducing the consensual sex age to 16, just think of a situation where a girl in class 10, but she's that old, when she's required to prove, just in case that she's been assaulted, that it was not consensual sex. So there's so many other issues. I would not like to touch on issues which the other speakers have already touched on, but I really think that reducing the age to 16 is an extremely ridiculous idea. And I think girls between 16 and 18 will feel more vulnerable and unprotected. I mean, they're getting married off, that's fine. Nobody's challenging the validity of their marriage, or nobody's taking them to court for that. This law really rule will come really into play when they have been sexually abused or something has happened. And then now the onus will lie on the girl of class 10 instead of a girl of class 12 who's a little more mature to prove that it was not consensual sex.